In this kitchen, we do not cut the bread the day it comes out of the oven. We never have. My mother never did, and her mother before her never did either. The bread that we bake on a Tuesday afternoon is the bread that we sit down to eat on a Wednesday. It was always that way, and when I was a little girl standing on a wooden milk crate just to reach the kneading board, nobody ever gave me a big explanation as to why. We didn't ask why. It was simply the way the work was done. Like so many other things in this house that you learn by watching the older hands and doing the exact same thing until your own hands remember it in the dark. A few summers ago, one of my granddaughters, the one who went off to the city to study the modern ways of food, sat right where you are sitting now across the table. She watched me set a fresh, dark loaf on the windowsill, and she asked me why we always let the bread sleep through the night before we took the knife to it. I gave her the old answer, the only answer my mother ever gave me, which is almost no answer at all. I told her that the loaf needs to settle. I told her that hot bread is a heavy brick for a working stomach, and that yesterday's bread is infinitely lighter on the spirit than today's. She looked at me for a long moment, took a sip of her tea, and she told me that there are people in great universities who have spent their whole lives studying that exact thing. She said they have very long, complicated words for what happens inside the crumb when the heat goes away. I don't keep those long words in my head. My head is full enough with the summer canning schedule and the birthdays of my great-grandchildren. But she told me that the old women were right, and for me, that was enough. What happens to the bread when it cools down is something that takes place deep inside the loaf, in a quiet place that your eyes cannot see and your fingers cannot touch. But it changes the very soul of the harvest. When a loaf is pulled straight out of the roaring fire of the hearth, the flour inside is still wild and furious. The internal latches of the grain are standing wide open. If you take a piece of that steaming soft bread into your mouth, your stomach doesn't have to do any honest work at all. It simply catches that melted flour and throws it directly into your blood like a sudden, violent summer downpour. It rushes you. The town doctors call that fast food for the blood. But that very same loaf, left alone to sit in the quiet dark of the pantry overnight, changes its mind. As the deep heat leaves the center, those little bits of flour, they reach out, they take hold of one another, and they lock their hands together into a tight iron grate. They settle. When you eat that bread the next morning, your stomach tries to tear those locked hands apart, and it finds that it cannot. And so, rather than rushing into your blood as a flood of sweet syrup, that armored grain walks very slowly, very peacefully down into your deep belly to feed the good living soil down there. My grandmother didn't know the scientific names for any of this. She just knew that yesterday's bread didn't make the men fall asleep under the oak tree at noon. She was right, for reasons she never needed to spell out on a chalkboard. And the grand truth of it is that this does not stop with the wheat. The earth works the exact same way with almost anything that grows in the ground and holds starch. The garden potatoes were the thing that surprised me the most when my granddaughter laid it all out for me. If you take a potato fresh out of the boiling pot, steaming and soft on the end of your fork, it acts inside your body just like that hot bread. It rushes your blood. But that exact same potato, boiled on a Monday afternoon and left to sit in the cool cellar until Tuesday noon, becomes a different gift entirely. Not because it is a different potato, but because the cold made the inside fold its hands together. In this farmhouse, we have always eaten our potato salad cold, made from the red tubers boiled the day before. We toss them in a stone bowl with a heavy pour of pressed olive oil, the sharp apple vinegar we keep in the big earthenware jug, a finely diced sweet onion, some coarse salt, and the flat parsley I pick from the back step. I never knew I was doing something that high-paid city experts would write down in their books today. I did it because that was how my aunt made it, and because a cold potato holds the vinegar better. It turns out it also protects the blood. My husband Jacob, the Lord rest his soul, lived to be 87 years old. He worked the south timber until his hair was completely white, and the doctor from town always marveled that his blood stayed as quiet and steady as a grandfather clock. Jacob ate that cold potato salad almost every summer noon of his working life. I don't know if the two things were tied together. The town doctor never said they were, but he never said they weren't either. The white rice behaves the very same way under the sky. When we boil rice in this kitchen, we make a large, heavy pot, enough for 2 days, never for one. The first evening, we eat it hot with the roasted chicken broth. But the second day, we take that cold rice out of the larder and we treat it with a very gentle, careful hand. You see, there is a massive difference between warming the food up and re-cooking a food. And your body knows the difference, even if your tongue is too hurried to notice. If you take yesterday's cold rice and you put it back over a roaring flame until it is whistling and throwing off thick, heavy clouds of steam, you have broken the locks. You have melted the iron grate back into wild flour. But if you take that cold rice and you set it in a pan over the very lowest dying ember of the stove, just turning it gently with a wooden spoon until the raw chill is gone off the grain, just warm enough that it doesn't shock your teeth when you bite it, the locks stay shut. There are old cultures across the great oceans, peoples my mother never saw in her geography books, who have eaten their rice cooled down this way for hundreds of years, and their old folks stayed lean and nimble in the fields. It was not an accident. Nature leaves clues for those who have the patience to sit still and look. Let me tell you the exact way we handle the bread in this kitchen, because the small details are the places where the truth lives. And doing a thing halfway is usually just a waste of good firewood. I bake my loaves in the middle of the afternoon, once the heavy midday dishes are washed, and the iron stove has a deep, reliable bed of red coals. When the loaves come out, tapping hollow and golden on the bottom, I do not leave them near the stove. I carry them over to the slatted wooden trivet that sits right beneath the north window. We use the north window because the sun never strikes the glass on that side of the house. The breeze comes off the shade of the walnut trees, cool and even. I leave them there to lose their fire completely, which takes 2 or 3 hours, depending on how heavy the dough was. Once the crust is completely cool to the back of my hand, I take a clean, heavy cloth made of raw flax linen, and I wrap the loaf up tight like a sleeping baby. You do not use plastic. I will say that to you twice so you don't forget it. Never put your family's bread in plastic. A loaf of bread is a breathing, living thing. It needs to pass the air through its skin during the night, and plastic chokes it wet. I set the wrapped loaf inside the wooden bread box, shut the lid, and I walk away. The next morning, when the kitchen is still dark and cold, that loaf is ready for the world. You can slice it and eat it just as it is, cold and dense, with a piece of sharp cheese, which is how I take it when I am in a hurry. Or you can lay that heavy slice into the black skillet with a small pad of salted butter over the morning flame. The iron will give you back the crunch. It will wake up the nutty smell of the field, but the latches inside the flour will stay locked. You get the comfort of the hot hearth with the total safety of the cold stone. The rolled oats are another thing the modern world has managed to turn completely upside down. People in the city wake up to a loud bell, throw dry oats into a pot of violently boiling water, stir it into a grey paste for 3 minutes, and swallow it down while they are putting their shoes on. That is a heavy, wet brick to drop into a waking body. We do not cook our oats in the morning. We make them when the sun goes down. You take your stone bowl, you put in your dry oats, you pour cold well water or the morning's raw milk over them until they are covered. You set a ceramic saucer over the top, and you leave it alone on the pantry shelf. When you come down the stairs at 5 in the morning, the oats have done their own cooking in the dark silence. They have drunk the water, they have plumped up soft, and they are ready for the spoon. You put a little scoop of raw honey over them, some grated winter apple, maybe a few cracked walnuts from the jar. That cold soaked oat holds the shields up. It feeds your strength without making your heart race. My mother called it night oats. I call it night oats. My granddaughter from the university calls it undenatured, raw, prebiotic-resistant fibre. You can call it George if it makes you happy. The bowl tastes the exact same. There is one final thing that belongs to this story, because a good seed dropped onto concrete still won't grow. It is not just what sits on the board. It is how you sit before it. In this kitchen, we do not eat on the run. We never have. When the food is set down, the work stops. You sit your body down in the wooden chair. You bow your head. You offer thanks to the one who made the rain fall on the wheat. And you take your time. You chew your food until it is liquid in your mouth before you let it go down. If you swallow your supper whole, like a dog catching a scrap off the porch, your stomach goes into a state of panic and your blood jumps. You must grant your physical frame the dignity of time. Now, look at me across the table before I let you go back to your work. I am an old country woman. I do not wear a white coat. I do not have a framed certificate hanging on my parlor wall. And I cannot look through your skin to see how your blood is running. If you have an illness of the sweet blood, or if your town doctor has given you strict written rules for your daily plate, you listen to that man. He studied his trade, and I have only studied my stove. What I am sharing with you today is not a medical prescription from a town pharmacy. It is merely the memory of a farmhouse table that kept my people upright through 80 hard winters. It is the way we do things. Take it home, put your bread on the sill, let the heat go out into the night, and see how your own body answers it. If our visit today brought a little bit of quiet to your morning, I ask that you press that little button below that says you liked our talk. There is a young mother somewhere in a high concrete building right now who thinks she has to starve herself of good wheat just to keep her figure, and she doesn't know yet that yesterday's loaf is her ally. That little button helps this kitchen reach her window. Leave me a line in the comments below. Tell me what your own grandmother used to wrap her bread in, and tell me what part of the big world you are sitting in while you listen to this. Next week, if the Lord spares my health, I am going to show you the single wooden spoon of sour liquid my mother worked into the daily dough that makes the wheat drop its heavy armor entirely. Until then, keep your hearth clean and be kind to your table.